right. Hi, everyone. I hope that you have been having a great week. I'm really sorry that this is going up late. I had it filmed and then I filmed it in the wrong way and it didn't let me share it. So we're just going to do this over again and keep moving on. This week, we are going over food webs and food chains. This kind of builds off of our photosynthesis. I'm really excited. Like I said, this is one of my favorite units in life science. So let's just go ahead and get started with our do now number one. What are the products of photosynthesis? Products is the fancy word for what comes after. So, what are the products of photosynthesis? And do now number two. What is the compound that plants use to absorb the energy from light? If you remember, we read this together in our article. What is the compound that plants use to absorb the energy from light? All right, so let's go over our do nows. For do now number one, the products or what comes after is oxygen and glucose. I know that a lot of us have been writing sugar. Glucose is technically the sugar, but I also want to make sure that you are practicing using the scientific term for glucose. And we know that glucose is the food that the plant needs in order to use energy and grow. And do now number two, the compound that plants use to absorb energy from the light is chlorophyll. Chlorophyll allows that sun energy to be absorbed and used by the plant to do the process of photosynthesis. Okay, so what do we know about organisms? And again, an organism is anything that is alive. We know that they need energy to survive. You and I, everything we do, every move that we make, we need energy. And we've learned so far that the main source of all energy on the planet is the sun. Unfortunately, we as mammals cannot just lay in the sun and absorb the energy from it and then be able to move on our day. That would be fantastic. That's just not how it works. Plants, however, like we saw in photosynthesis, do get their energy from the sun. They are able to create that food with the energy from the sun. And then we use those plants to get energy. So, because of this, we know that animals get energy from eating plants or other animals. We know that this is true for animals. This is not true for plants. Plants do not need to eat, they make their own food through photosynthesis. Animals do. And so when we're looking at ecosystems in the wild, it's very important to kind of try to figure out where everything gets its energy from. It allows us to study that ecosystem better, but it also allows us to see what the most important organisms in those ecosystems are. So, again, the sun is the main source of energy in every ecosystem. And as you can see, we have a picture of a gorilla here. He is gaining energy by eating the leaves. And so, to study these interactions in an ecosystem, we have something called a food chain. A food chain shows how energy is passed from one organism to the other. So, how energy is passed from one organism to the other. So, if you see here, this is a very simple three-step food chain. We have our grass. Now, notice that we have these arrows here. As these food chains get more and more complicated, the arrows are the most important thing to know because these arrows tell us the direction that energy and matter is flowing. So we know that this grass gives its energy to the rabbit. This rabbit gives its energy to the fox. If these arrows were turned around, that would be a different story. Because again, we know that plants are at the beginning of our food chains. So the energy starts here and it moves to the rabbit. The fox then eats the rabbit. So the rabbit's energy moves to the fox. I know that I just said the fox eats the rabbit. And when we talk about an ecosystem, at least the way that we've been talking about it before now, that's generally what we say. You know, animal X eats animal Y. This animal eats that. This eats that. which makes us think about it in that direction. The fox eats the rabbit, and we think about it as the fox to the rabbit. But remember, we're tracking the direction that energy goes. So even though the fox does eat the rabbit, that means that the fox gets its energy from the rabbit. The rabbit gives its energy to the fox. These arrows do not show who eats who, and that is so important to remember. These arrows do not show who eats who. These arrows show who gives energy to who. The grass gives energy to the rabbit. The rabbit gives energy to the fox. Okay. We're going to make those mistakes. It happens every year, and that's okay. But that's why we practice so much, to try to get that out of our head. So let's think it out, right? Again, just like we said, the energy starts in the plant. There's nothing before the plant, because the plant gets its energy from the sun. It gets its energy from the sun through doing photosynthesis. The energy goes from the grass to the rabbit. Then it goes from the rabbit to the fox. And that is how that energy goes out. Oops, sorry. Another food chain. There's a couple of things in here that I'm going to be very honest, we're going to ignore for now, because we're going to talk about it more tomorrow. But as we can see, this kind of shows, right, that we have the sun and the water gives it to the grass. Now, I'll be very honest with you, we're not ever really going to see an arrow going into a producer, except in a more complicated food chain, and we'll talk about why that is. But this is just showing you where that producer gets its energy from, again, from the sun and the water through photosynthesis. Ooh, it's missing something. This graph is actually wrong. Can you tell me the missing item that helps give grass energy? Carbon dioxide. Exactly. Carbon dioxide is also a molecule that is needed to do photosynthesis. So here we see that the grass gives energy. Again, that arrow gives energy to the grasshopper. The grasshopper gives energy to the snake. Again, this arrow does not mean that the grasshopper is eating the snake. It's giving its energy to the snake. The snake gives its energy to the hawk. Okay, let's go on. All right, so let's do a very quick practice. Who does the snake give its energy to? Now we get a little bit more complicated. The food web. The food web is a system of connected food chains. This is awesome, right? It's very easy to keep track of, but this is not what an ecosystem looks like in nature. It's not just the mouse only eats the cricket, the snake only eats the mouse, the hawk only eats the snake. That's not how ecosystems work. In an ecosystem, we actually have multiple food chains that are connected to create a food web, which is much like what we see here. We have a plant or whatever it is that gives that initial energy, and we have all of these different things that eat each other. So the energy starts here at the bottom of the food chain, and it goes here and it goes here, right? It goes all throughout. Again, these arrows show what gives energy to what. It doesn't show you who eats who. So let's think it out. The energy from the worm goes to the lizard. Therefore, that means that the worm is eaten by the lizard, but it's also eaten by the bird. So the bird gets energy from the worm. Okay. The reason that I'm kind of saying it out like this, and I know that it sounds complicated, is because in a lot of the exit tickets that we're going to do and just moving forward, I'm not always going to give you this diagram. What I'm actually going to do is give you a story that tells you the way that matter moves throughout an ecosystem, and you are going to create the actual food web, the actual diagram. So a way that we would say this here is the grass gives its energy to the worm, the snail, the bird, and the rabbit. So that means that I need to draw a grass with arrows pointing out that go to the worm, the snail, the bird, and the rabbit. I could also say the worm gets its energy from the grass. Again, that means that the grass gives energy to the worm. We just need to really focus on who gives its energy to who. So now what we're going to do is we're going to see how to think this out. This would be the story that I would give you. Berries give energy to the rabbit. Owls get their energy from the rabbit. Okay. So we know that berries give its energy to the rabbit. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to write in my rabbit. So who gives its energy to the rabbit? What gives energy to the rabbit? Well, we know it's the berries. So I have my first section, the berries gives energy to the rabbit. Now, owls get their energy from the rabbit. So we know that that means that the rabbit gives its energy to the owl. Notice this arrow is on this side because it's showing you who gives energy to who. We're not saying that the owl eats the rabbit, right? We're not saying that we're not saying that the berries eat the rabbit. That would look like this. And we know that that's not true, right? We don't have these crazy killer berries that are going to eat the rabbit. That would be weird. What it's showing you is that berries give their energy to the rabbit. No killer berries in this ecosystem, thank goodness. So that's how that happens. This was a very easy one. That was just a food chain. But again, we know that in nature, that's not how it happens. So let's up it up a little bit. Let's go ahead and read this together. Grass gives energy to the ant and cricket. The mouse gets its energy from the cricket and the ant. The ant also gives its energy to the frog. The mouse gives its energy to the eagle and the snake. That sounds complicated, but don't panic. We just need to break it down piece by piece. So we are going to focus on one sentence at a time so that it doesn't get too intense and we don't get overwhelmed. So the first sentence, grass gives energy to the ant and the cricket. So we know that we're going to start with grass. Grass is at the bottom of our food chain. And the grass gives its energy to two different things. So I'm going to put my arrows going out from it. And I know that it gives its energy to the ant and the cricket. Now we also see that the mouse gets its energy from the cricket and the ant. So now the cricket and the ant are giving its energy to something. And in this instant, it's the mouse. So I'm going to draw the mouse up there. And I'm going to have an arrow leaving from the cricket to the mouse, right? Not the mouse to the cricket. From the cricket to the mouse, because the cricket gives its energy to the mouse. Also, we know that the ant gives its energy to the mouse. So both of these give its energy to the same thing. They're pointing at the same one. Great. Second sentence done. The ant also gives its energy to the frog. So the ant gives its energy to two things. Boom, done. The mouse gives its energy to the eagle, and it also gives it to the snake. So that means that from my mouse, I'm going to draw an arrow to the eagle and to the snake. An easy way to get started, honestly, is just to make sure that you have your plants at the bottom. We'll talk about, that makes the most sense, right? We're not, again, those killer berries. We're not going to have this crazy killer grass. It always starts with a plant. And we'll talk about that tomorrow and what these are actually called. But we know that all arrows need to be pointing up and they need to be pointing away from our plant because they're not going to give their energy to the plant, right? The grass is going to give it to the cricket gives it to the mouse. The arrows always point up or away from our grass. Okay. So let's recap, which means it's time for our major keys. So, number one, all organisms depend on each other. Energy must flow and cycle between organisms for them to survive. Today, we kind of saw phase one of that. We're going to get into more detail of what that looks like throughout the coming weeks. And number two, the arrow in a food web shows the direction matter and energy are going, not who eats who. All right? We're not talking about who eats who. We're talking about the plant gives its energy to the snail gives energy to the crab gives energy to the fish. We're not saying that the crab eats the fish. Now it's your turn. We're going to do 2 quick questions. Who does the snake give its energy to? Number 2, who gets their energy from the grass? All right, so we know that the grass, we can always check where the arrows are pointing. We see that the arrows are pointing to the mouse, to the rabbit, and to the grasshopper. All right, so thank you for tuning in. Make sure to watch the video till the end. Today's exit ticket is different. Now, first of all, I have been noticing a lot of you guys have been doing the Edpuzzle lessons, which is great, but you don't go to Illuminate afterwards to do the exit ticket. So starting tomorrow, I'm going to reopen old exit tickets that you haven't taken. You can go back in and take those. But today's exit ticket is different. It is assigned through Google Classroom. It is not in Illuminate. It will be assigned so that when you're done, please go to the assignment on Google Classroom and mark as done after you've watched this Edpuzzle, and then go ahead and do the exit ticket. There will be a how-to video on how to do it. It looks like a Google slide, but what you're doing is you're dragging the answers into the right spot or typing things in. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you for being patient with my refilming, and I will see y'all on Thursday. Bye.